Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the 4-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. This is game 1 of the playoffs for the 2020 MLB season, and we got some pretty good matchups here, and I'm pretty excited for it. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be doing any other MLB DFS videos this season, but since we have a 4-game slate, I figured why not? Let's break it down. But if it gets below 4, I probably won't end up doing a video for it. Maybe, but definitely not 2 and definitely not 1. But since we have 4 games here, pretty decent slate, and I thought I would cover it. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit the subscribe button. I was already here all season long, so I'm not going to say that again, but I do cover other sports as well, including NASCAR and the NFL, pretty much each and every single day or each and every single weekend. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you don't follow me on social media, my handle's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you want for more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated, but just wait until the first of the month because I assume no one's going to want MLB content because we're pretty much done with MLB because the slates are going to get smaller soon enough. We're still going to have a couple of days here with some decent-sized slates, but as the teams get thinned out, these slates are going to get smaller and just worse for DFS purposes. So you can sign up for the NFL or NASCAR content if you are interested. Links down below for that. But if not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. Now, keep in mind, this slate starts pretty early. I believe the first game is at around 2 p.m. That would be the Houston-Minnesota game. Then it's kind of staggered. So then we got Chicago and Oakland at 3, Tampa Bay and Toronto at 5, and then the Yankees and Indians game at 7, which should be a pretty good game. And I'm looking forward to that one quite a bit because you guys know I'm a big Indians fan, and we got Shane Bieber versus Garrett Cole. You pretty much have the best pitcher of 2020 on the mound and the best pitcher of 2019 on the mound in Garrett Cole and Shane Bieber. So that should be a pretty fun game from a pitching duel standpoint. I'm really looking for bats in that game for the most part, maybe outside of a couple of heavy hitters on Cleveland, but that's just about it for there. But we'll start with the pitchers here. We got plenty of aces here because, most of these teams are throwing out their best pitcher besides Toronto for the most part. They decided to roll out Matt Shoemaker instead of Ryu, which is kind of interesting, but look, I'm not the manager, so I'm not going to question his decisions. He knows more than I do. But we'll start up top here with Shane Bieber. He comes in at $9,000. And thankfully, DraftKings made it a little bit easier to fit in the stud pitchers. Because if this is a regular slate, where you're going to get Bieber around $11,000, Garrett Cole around $10,000, Lucas Giolito's going to be around $10,000, Blake Snell is going to be above $9K, Maeda's probably going to be around $10K. So fortunately, they made it not too hard to do at all. Like Bieber's at $9,000. That's just a complete bargain, and he's certainly my SP1 on the slate. Now you can make a case for any of these guys: Bieber, Garrett Cole, Lucas Giolito, Blake Snell, even Maeda. But Shane Bieber has been by far the best pitcher in baseball this season. Now the matchup versus the New York Yankees is not something I am looking forward to, but that's also not something I'm looking forward to from the Yankees from an offensive standpoint as well. Like, playing against Shane Bieber just does not typically go well for the opposing offense. If we're looking at his numbers this season, he's been just so elite: 1.63 ERA, a 2.04 xFIP, a 41% K rate with only a 26% hard contact rate, and .81 home runs per 9 innings. Now, if you're looking at the matchup sucks. It's pretty much all red bars here. 21% K rate, which is not that bad. A 208 ISO, a 254 batting average, a 122 WRC plus, and a 350 WOBA. No, I do not think this matchup is good at all. On the bright side, he is pitching at home, which is a bit of a boost because I don't really like using pitchers in Yankees Stadium that much. Even though Indians, it's more of a hitter's park than as a pitching park, but at least it's something that he's familiar with pitching at home. And also the Yankees only have a 3.25 implied team total as well. It's a 50% chance for the win here. It's pretty much even for the Yankees and the Indians game 1 here. But Shane Bieber, he's just been so dominant this season, and I have to imagine that's just going to continue here. Yeah, there's some bats in this lineup that I'm afraid of. Aaron Judge, you got Stanton, Luke Voigt, DJ LeMahieu, and a couple of other guys as well, Aaron Hicks. But Shane Bieber, man, he's just been so good this year, and he can certainly rack up some strikeouts. So I definitely like him. His worst game of the year was 19 fantasy points. Like, he has just been so fantastic. We've had multiple games over 40 fantasy points. We've seen games where he's gotten up to 14 strikeouts. He's been in double-digit strikeouts in a majority of the games he's had this season. And actually, his worst strikeout game of the year was 8. His worst strikeout game of the year was 8, which is very, very impressive. So, yeah, I don't like the matchup, but look at Shane Bieber for $9,000. You can sign me up for that. Garrett Cole, 8,600. I actually think he might end up being higher owned than Shane Bieber. And I feel like it might be kind of chalky. The chalky way to go would be like a Garrett Cole with a Giolito or a Garrett Cole with a Blake Snell. but I still would say Shane Bieber is my SP1, but you do save a little bit of money with Garrett Cole here. He's also having a pretty good season. Now, he hasn't been as dominant as Shane Bieber. I mean, there's no denying that. He's got a 3.38 xFIP, which is nearly, not 2 runs, but nearly 1.5 runs higher than Shane Bieber. A strikeout rate of 8% less than Bieber as well. 6% walk rate. Giving up some fly balls, 37% hard contact rate, and 1.73 home runs per 9 innings. That's kind of been Garrett Cole's bugaboo this season, is just giving up homers. But he kind of dialed that in his past couple of starts. He did give up 2 home runs in the past 4 starts, but that's really not that bad compared to what it was earlier in the season. There was games where he gave up 2, 3, and 2. Then he had a stretch of just giving up a home run each and every single outing. But he's been on fire the past 4 starts. He scored 27 points, 41, 30, and 28. Matchup versus Cleveland. Again, I don't really love the matchups for Garrett Cole or Shane Bieber, but the Indians' offense is obviously going to be a little bit weaker here than the New York Yankees, which is why I think most people will go with Garrett Cole. Now, if you want to just not go with Shane Bieber in cash games and go with Garrett Cole, I certainly understand that. If you can play both, I wouldn't mind that either, because there's some nice value bats on this slate that I don't, because some of the bats really, I think they're a little bit underpriced. So I don't think it's going to be too hard to fit both these guys in, especially because they're discounted about $1,000, $2,000 than what they actually should be. But if you're looking at the matchup for Garrett Cole, obviously it's going to look a lot better than Shane Bieber's 23% strikeout rate, 142 team ISO, 227 batting average, a 305 OBA, and 87 WRC plus. So I understand wanting to go with Garrett Cole over Shane Bieber in cash games. If you can play both, go for it, but I think both are excellent options here. 9 strikeouts over in Vegas, and obviously he's been a fantastic pitcher this season. So yeah, both are elite options here, and you're kind of just splitting hairs up top. But just looking at the numbers overall, Shane Bieber has been the best pitcher in baseball this year. And Lucas Giolito, 8,300. He gets a matchup here versus Oakland, and it's actually not a bad spot here. They have a 23.7% strikeout rate to righties, only a 227 batting average, 318 WOBA, 104 WRC plus. Not the best matchup in the world again. It's the playoffs, so it's a little tricky. I mean, we're going to have good pitchers versus pretty good offenses for the most part. So you kind of got to pick your poison of where you're going. But Giolito, he's been fine this season. 27 points, 11, 16's a little bit in, but then 26, 20, 59, 43. We know he's got plenty of upside here. He's got over a 30% K rate at 34%, a nice 3.35 xFIP, only 1 home run per 9 inning, 33% hard contact rate. I think he's a fine option for only 8,300. We usually see his price around the $10,000 range. So again, you're getting a nice discount on Lucas Giolito. So he's fine for the price point. And Blake Snell at only 7,800. I could see him being a pretty popular SP2 to pair up with a guy like Shane Bieber, Garrett Cole, or even Lucas Giolito, because he just seems a bit too cheap here. Now, he certainly has not been as good as the 3 guys above him. Like Lucas Giolito, Garrett Cole, Shane Bieber, these guys have all been clear aces. Blake Snell is an ace on the Rays, but, well, I guess you also have Tyler Glass now there, so it's a little bit iffy in that category. But I do like the price point for Blake. He's a guy that has over a 30% K rate. Again, like all 4 of these pitchers have K rates above 30% this season. He is giving up nearly 2 home runs per 9 innings, but this is a pretty good park for pitching in Tampa Bay. If this was in Buffalo, I'd have some concerns, but, I mean, $7,800 at home, only a 3.14 implied team total against them, a pretty heavy favorite here, 7 strikeouts. And the Rays, I believe, have the highest team total on these slates, so I think there's a good chance he can get you the win. He's not someone that's going to typically go too deep into games. I mean, the 9% walk rate can get him into some troubles a little bit. Can get him into trouble a little bit. But I think he'll be okay here. He's been over 5 innings in all of his starts since August 7th, so should be able to pick up the win here, and I think he's a fine option for the price point. If you're looking at the matchup of how the Blue Jays have done versus lefties this season, it's not like the best matchup in the world, but again, I mean, all these guys are good pitchers, and all these teams are in the playoffs for a reason for the most part. So it's going to be a little bit iffy, but a 24% K rate, 8% walk rate, 107 WRC plus, 262 batting average is a little high, but I still like that price point for Blake Snell. If he can get us around, so strikeouts the past like 6 starts. It's been 9, 4, 5, 8, 5, and 9. I'm trying to see if he played Toronto in any of these starts. He did on August 24th. He had 9 strikeouts and scored 23.8 fantasy points, which was the second best game of the entire season. So, and he also faced them in his first start, but he was on a pitch count where he only went 2 innings, but he struck out 5 in 2 innings. So, it's 2 starts versus them, limited sample size, but he did rack up quite a bit of strikeouts. So, only 7,800, I think he's a pretty solid option. Then we'll move on to the bats at this point. I'm going to start with catcher. Probably not going to be spending up for catcher, but I do like James McCann here at 3,800 going up against the lefty Luzardo. Now, I think I always say Luzardo. whatever you guys prefer. But anyway, I do like the White Sox here. Now, he's a fine pitcher if you're looking at his numbers this season. I mean, really nothing bad you can say about him. 282 WOBA to lefties, 28% K rate to lefties, and only a 326 WOBA to righties, and a 24% K rate to righties as well. The ISO numbers are a little bit off, so I'll have to update that. Or actually, I'll have to fix that, not update it. But he's a good pitcher, but the White Sox are a team that have been very, very good versus left-handed pitching this season. I know midpoint of the season, I remember them having over a 300 ISO to left-handed pitching. I'm sure that's went down a little bit, but still, they've hit lefties very well this year, and James McCann is a guy that does hit lefties pretty well. A 400 batting average to them this season, a 209 WRC+, 200 ISO, a 473 WOBA, and I believe a couple of slates ago, James McCann did homer off of a lefty. I forget exactly who it was against, but I like James McCann at only 3,800. I do like the White Sox on this slate just because they do hit left-handed pitching very well. Don't love the matchup here, also don't love the park for hitting. But it's going to be tough to pick these bats today because there's a lot of good pitchers on this slate. So you're not going to feel comfortable with a lot of these guys, but do like the spot for the White Sox. Mike Zunino at 3,400, going up against Matt Shoemaker here. I was surprised I didn't go with Ryu, and I know quite a few people on Twitter were as well, but I think Zunino is fine. The Rays do have the highest team total on the slate currently at 4.36, which usually that's not a team we'd love to target on a main slate, but given that it's a 4-game playoff slate, a 4.36 total does not look that bad. Now, Zunino, he's a guy that's going to strike out a lot. 44% to lefties this season and a 43% K rate to righties this season. So it's pretty much all or nothing for this guy. A very low batting average at 167, but a 271 ISO to righties. He's got some pop versus them. He's going up against Matt Shoemaker here. And the Rays are just in a decent spot now. DraftKings has Robbie Ray as the projected long relief. So if that's the case, we should get a few innings from Matt Shoemaker, and we could get a few innings from Robbie Ray, who just really hasn't been that sharp this season either. So this is a pretty good spot for the Tampa Bay Rays, and I think Zunino's fine at 3,400. And if you just want a punt option, we have Roberto Perez at 2,200. Look, I don't really want to use anyone versus Garrett Cole, but again, there's slim pickings on a 4-game slate in the playoffs because pretty much every pitcher on the slate is pretty good besides Matt Shoemaker. I think that's the obvious target for offense just because Shoemaker is, easily the weakest link here in the slate for pitchers. But at only 2,200, I think he's fine just because Garrett Cole has been giving up quite a bit of power this season. He's been just serving up home runs. Now, he's limited that in his past few starts, so I really don't think it's going to be too much of an issue here. But if you can get a cheap home run from Perez at 2,200 at catcher, fine. I mean, the numbers suck versus Rays this season, but it's kind of just whatever, a pump play at catcher. Dropping out of first base, we have some more exciting options, and Jose Abreu at 5,100. He's been crushing lefties this season. Again, I don't really want to pick on Luzardo, but given the slate, the White Sox do hit lefties well, so they're going to be pretty interesting here. And looking at Abreu's numbers versus lefties, a 340 ISO and your 400 WOBA and a 617 slugging. So I think he's fine. Edwin Encarnacion, the knockoff version of Jose Abreu. He's got plenty of power versus lefties, but hitting only 133 versus them this season with a 30% K rate, but a 333 ISO. So you might be able to get a cheap home run from Edwin Encarnacion, or maybe just a double, something like that. That would be fine at the price point. Then Nate Lowe, Brandon Lowe or Nate Lowe. I can never remember those guys, and I have them back to back here, so I'm not sure. I have no idea. Can never remember, but let's just call him Nate Lowe, I think. But anyway, 3,500. He's got some decent pop versus righties. It's a limited sample size this season because he didn't play too much, but a 318 ISO to righties, a 373 WOBA versus them, a 142 WRC+, and a 568 slugging. So I think it's time for the price point. I do like this Tampa Bay Rays stack on this slate. Not a great park for hitting, but again, Matt Shoemaker is the weakest link here. Then Brandon Lowe, you can just roast me in the comments if I have this completely backwards, but I apologize. But I do know their statistics, and I know these are two pretty decent hitters. Now, Brandon, he's been better versus lefties this season, actually, he's still got good numbers versus righties, but his numbers versus lefties, he's got a 420 ISO, a 300 batting average, a 720 slugging, and a 206 WRC+. Pretty darn good numbers, but the numbers versus righties still are pretty good as well. 265 batting average, 515 slugging, a 250 ISO, 134 WRC+. The numbers aren't too bad, so I think he's definitely fine. I do like the Rays stack on this slate. He's one of their best bats. Joey Wendell at 3,900. He's also eligible at third base as well, but he's got some decent splits versus Rays this season. Not a lot of power, but 190 ISO, 337 WOBA, 278 batting average. He's a fine, cheap addition to your Tampa Bay Rays stack, or if you want to use him as a one-off, that's fine too. Then Nick Madrigal here at 3,000. just a cheap righty here versus Luzardo. Now, his numbers versus lefties this season are pretty trashy. He's been much better versus righties, but again, it's just cheap White Sox exposure. Dropping down to third base, we have one of the hottest hitters in the league right now in Jose Ramirez at 5,300. And I've been saying this all year. He's a guy that can be streaky. If he's cold, he is cold. You're not going to want to touch him, but when he's hot, he's hot. You're definitely going to want him in your lineups because I believe I read a stat that his last 11 hits to end the season were all extra base hits, which is incredible. And he's been great versus lefties this season. Not to say he's not been good versus righties, but versus lefties, I mean, he's been insane. And your 550 ISO, a 537 WOBA, 887 slugging, just incredible numbers. Now versus righties, the numbers are still fine. A 261 batting average, an 18% K rate, a 362 WOBA, over a 230 ISO, and overall some very strong numbers. And again, he is hot. And Garrett Cole, he'll give up some power, and Ramirez is going to be hitting as a lefty, so I think he's fine. Again, I don't really want to pick on Garrett Cole, but if you have some money and you want to spend it for a one-off at third base, I don't hate the idea of using JRM just because there's some power upside there. Then Yoel Moncada at 4,700. I prefer him better versus righties. Now, he's improved versus lefties. The past couple of years before this, he was pretty brutal versus lefties. He has improved, and his batting average is actually a little... I thought it was just a little bit higher, but I guess I was getting him confused with someone else. It's a 219 versus lefties and 224 versus righties. But I still think he's fine here. I do like the White Sox stacks, even though, I love picking at Luzardo, but a team total of nearly 4 is good enough on this slate, and they do hit lefties very well. Then Yoshi here at 3,700. Projected to be leading off here versus righty and Matt Shoemaker. And if you're looking at his numbers this season, only a 184 batting average to righties, but over a 200 ISO, and he's cheap, and I do like the race stack, so I think he is totally fine. Dropping down to shortstop, we have Tim Anderson at 5,100, who has been absolutely incredible versus left-handed pitching this season, like some of the best numbers you will see. Again, it's a smaller sample size because it was a shorter season, and he also, I believe he was hurt for quite some time, but still, he's got a decent amount of at-bats versus lefties this season. He's got a 600 ISO versus them, a 489 batting average, a 1,000 slugging, a 333 WRC+, just incredible numbers, and shortstop is pretty weak on this slate, so if you want to make your one spend-up position shortstop, I don't mind that at all. And Tim Anderson's in a great spot here versus lefties, so I don't mind old Tim. Willie Adams. I'm not sure on the last name. He's another one of those guys that I just really haven't heard them say his last name. But at 4,100, he's fine here, and especially if he sees a lefty, if Robbie Ray happens to end up coming in. Now, DraftKings, they have him projected as a long relief, so we'll see. But I still think we're going to get a decent amount of innings from Matt Shoemaker here, but he's got fine splits versus lefties and versus righties, a 277 ISO to lefties and a 215 ISO to righties. So I think he's fine if you're using a bunch of raised bats. And Jorge Polanco at 3,300. Now, Zach Greinke's been very strong versus lefties this season. If you're looking at his splits, he's got a 234 WOBA to lefties, a 32% K rate to lefties as well. Now, when it comes to the righties, he's been worse with a 354 WOBA and a 16% K rate. So I guess the numbers would say we want righties versus him, but the problem is all the guys in the Twins that I like are lefties for the most part. So and I like the price points on them, so it's mainly just a price play. And they do have a team total of 4.18, which is one of the higher ones on the slate as well. So I don't really want to pick on Greinke, but again, it's just the nature of this slate. And if you're looking at Polanco's numbers this season, he's been better versus lefties compared to righties by quite a bit, but I just like the price point for the most part, and that's just about it. Then dropping down to the outfield, don't really love any of the expensive guys, but Eloy Jimenez here is 4,600 projected bag and cleanup here. He got some decent power versus lefties this year with a 267 ISO and a near 300 batting average, so I think he is fine on your White Sox stacks or just even as a one-off. Eddie Rosario, again, Greinke has been very strong versus left-handed bats this season, but these guys are cheap and they got power versus righties, so that's why I have them in play. If you're looking at Rosario's splits versus righties this year, and your 300 ISO, a 559 slugging, a 138 WRC+, and overall some very strong numbers, so I think he's fine. Kyle Tucker, I don't want to pick on Maeda. He's had some strong numbers this season, a 231 WOBA to lefties and a 28% K rate, but Kyle Tucker has hit righties well this season, 277 ISO, 577 slugging, a 300 batting average, so I think he's in play, but a 332 implied team totals does not get me excited in the slightest, I will tell you that. Max Kepler at 3,700. I imagine he's going to end up being a little bit chalky here just because of the price point, and people like playing Max Kepler. That I am one of those guys. He is great versus right-handed pitching. The problem is Greinke's great versus lefties, but Kepler's also very good versus righties. So it's kind of just someone's gonna win out here, and I like the price point on Max Kepler, and as you can see, dark green bars here for Kepler, so I think he's a fine play. Just I don't love that matchup versus Greinke. Then Hunter Renfroe at 3,400. I still think he's fine versus a righty. If he happens to end up seeing a lefty like Robbie Ray out of the bullpen, that I guess not really out of the, I guess technically out of the bullpen, but he crushes lefties. Now the only thing Hunter Renfroe does well is hit lefties for power, and that's about it. He's got a high strikeout rate to lefties and versus righties, and he doesn't really hit for a high batting average, 146 to lefties and 149 to righties. And overall, just all the numbers kind of suck. Besides his power versus lefties with a 366 ISO, so if he sees a lefty, might be able to get a cheap home run out of Hunter Renfroe. Robert here at 3,300. He's cheap. He has okay numbers versus lefties. Nothing too impressive, but he's cheap enough. He's got a little bit of speed as well. In near 200 ISO versus left-handed pitching this season. Tyler Naquin at 2,800. This is just cheap home run hunting. I don't really want to use guys versus Garrett Cole, but he has given up power this season. And Tyler Naquin, he's got a little bit of pop versus righties. He's got a 206 ISO to right-handed pitching this year over a 300 WOBA, a 262 batting average, and a 467 slugging. So he might be like a cheap home run call for the Indians. Then Adam Engel here at 2,300. He's dirt cheap, and he's hitting 333 to lefties this season with only a 6% K rate. So I think he's fine if you're using some White Sox or if you just want some value. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. If you want to check out my NFL content, feel free to do that. I'll have my first look video up later today or maybe in the morning. Depends when I wake up. We will see. But I appreciate you guys watching, and go Indians, I guess. I'd love to see them back in the World Series. That would be fantastic.